A single unmarked military coffin weighs exactly 180 pounds when it is filled with gravel instead of a soldier's body. That is the exact weight of the lie they tried to bury in a national cemetery while I was still breathing dirt in a black site prison across the border. They didn't build that fake grave out of respect for my service. They built it because a dead hero doesn't talk. A dead hero doesn't ask questions. And a dead hero certainly doesn't look into the logistics logs of classified tactical gear. They genuinely believed that by staging a flawless military funeral with full honors, a folded flag and a 21-gun salute, they had neatly closed the ledger on Operation Nightfall. They were dead wrong when I broke my own thumb to slip out of those rusted steel handcuffs. In that basement cell 3 weeks ago, I wasn't thinking about survival. I was calculating the exact distance between my executioners and the truth. I let the high-ranking architects of that operation believe that Julia Carter was resting 6 feet under the green grass of Arlington. I wore the uniform for 14 years, and if there is one absolute truth the special operations community drills into your marrow, it is this. The most dangerous weapon on a battlefield isn't a heat-seeking missile or a silent sniper. It is a soldier who has already been officially declared dead. My name is Julia Carter. I am 42 years old, and my name was scrubbed from the active duty roster exactly 9 months ago. The world thinks I am a memory preserved in a bronze plaque. But right now, I am sitting in the flickering gray light of an abandoned railway toolshed, watching a high-definition satellite feed of a compound that doesn't exist on any civilian map. For 9 months, the men who signed my death warrant have been sleeping peacefully, believing their multi-million-dollar corporate defense contracts were completely secure. They think the blood from Operation Nightfall has been permanently washed from their hands. But 3 hours ago, I tapped into the secure fiber optic transit lines, running beneath the Pentagon's logistics command. What I found wasn't just an administrative error or a case of low-level embezzlement. It was a ghost. Logistics network transferring. High-grade tactical. Military assets directly into the hands of private corporate militias. And the officer steering the entire operation from the shadows is General Arthur Vance, the exact man who stood at that empty casket and handed a folded flag to an empty room. He didn't just betray my unit. He commodified our deaths to clear the ledger for his private corporate investors. Right now, General Vance has a specialized recovery team scouring the northern grid, looking for an anomaly in their security perimeter. They think they are hunting a loose end. They think they are tracking a ghost who is running in fear, except they forgot the fundamental rule of the shadows. A ghost doesn't run away from the haunting. A ghost moves closer. If your chest feels tight and you can feel the cold grip of absolute suspense, do not look away from this screen. Subscribe to Silent Revenge Stories immediately. Because what I did to General Vance's secret network, his billionaire private military investors, and his absolute ironclad career over the next 48 hours, didn't just expose a crime, it completely burned his entire empire to the ground. The transition from being a captive to becoming a hunter requires an absolute calibration of the mind. When you have spent months in a concrete cell where the lights never turn off, your brain learns to strip away every single useless emotion until only raw strategy remains. I sat on the cold floor of that railway shed, running my fingers over the rough grip of an unregistered sidearm. I had taken off a guard 2 nights prior. The satellite feed on my weathered field laptop showed a heavily guarded logistics depot near the coast, Facility Blue Rock. On paper, it was a decommissioned naval storage yard waiting for state demolition. In reality, the thermal imaging filters I applied showed heavy underground power usage, automated security grids, and a fleet of armored transport trucks moving in a highly synchronized midnight pattern. General Arthur Vance wasn't just a corrupt bureaucrat sitting in a plush Washington office. He was the logistical commander of a parallel army funded entirely by black market defense capital. Every single piece of heavy operational equipment my unit had flagged as lost in theater during Operation Nightfall was currently sitting in the inventory logs of Facility Blue Rock, ready to be sold to the highest international bidder. I reached into my tactical pack and pulled out a small, old-fashioned analog radio scanner I didn't use digital communication because digital signals leave a permanent metadata footprint that Vance's automated tracking systems could flag within seconds. I manually tuned the dial to the old low frequency, military emergency band, a frequency that had been officially abandoned since the late 90s but remained physically active on older base repeaters. I knew the logistics guards at Blue Rock used it for internal patrol coordination because it bypassed the standard encrypted digital network that left automated logs. The static hissed through the single earpiece before a crisp, professional voice broke through the noise. Patrol Sector 3, status clear. Transport Team Bravo is locked and loaded. Departure set for 0200. I checked my watch. It was exactly 1:15 a.m. I had exactly 45 minutes before $80 million worth of stolen government military hardware rolled out of those gates to an international port. I didn't have a tactical team. I didn't have air support. And I didn't have the authority of the United States government behind me anymore. I had a dog named Duke waiting at a safe house miles away, a laptop with 40% battery life, and a complete, terrifying understanding of how General Vance's automated security network functioned. I didn't need to breach the steel walls of Blue Rock with explosives. In the modern era of warfare, the heavy steel doors are controlled by microprocessors, and microprocessors don't care about the rank on a uniform. They only care about the authentication key. 2 months before Operation Nightfall went dark, I had quietly cloned General Vance's personal administrative clearance token during a routine logistics audit at the main command base. It was a fail-safe measure I took because my instincts told me the numbers on the supply manifests weren't adding up. That cloned digital signature had been sitting idle in an encrypted folder on my drive for nearly a year. It was time to wake it up. I connected my field laptop to a high-gain directional antenna pointed directly at the main microwave relay tower rising above the trees of Facility Blue Rock. My fingers moved over the keys with cold, mechanical precision, inputting the old administrative override protocols line by line. System command override. Authorizing user General Arthur Vance. Security clearance, level 5. Alpha. The system hesitated. For 3 long, agonizing seconds as the remote servers validated the old clone token. Then, the progress bar turned a solid, glowing green. I was inside their central nervous system. I didn't shut down their security cameras, and I didn't trip the main alarms. If you cut the power, a highly trained security force immediately goes into a hard tactical lockdown, taking defensive positions and locking down every single entry, point with physical deadbolts. Instead, I used General Vance's administrative access to quietly rewrite the routing protocols of their automated inventory tracking database to the main logistics computers at the Department of Defense. Facility Blue Rock suddenly stopped appearing as a decommissioned yard. It actively registered as an unauthorized, highly volatile storage hub containing weapon systems that had been reported stolen from national stockpiles. I tied the internal inventory manifests directly to the public automated alert system of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, and the Main Oversight Committee on National Security. I didn't just send an email. I initiated a high-priority, stolen asset recovery protocol, using the General's own digital signature as the source of the whistleblow. To the federal computer networks, it looked as though General Arthur Vance had suddenly developed a massive crisis of conscience at 1 o'clock in the morning and was systematically documenting his entire treasonous operation directly to every law enforcement agency in the country in real time. The digital payload began, streaming gigabytes of unredacted financial transaction logs, shipping bills, and corporate offshore bank accounts straight into the secure government servers. I watched the data transmission indicator flash rapidly on my screen, knowing that every single byte of information was a heavy nail being driven into the coffin of Vance's career. But I wasn't finished. The physical manifestation of revenge requires a front row seat. I closed my laptop, slid it into my pack, and moved through the dark woods toward the western perimeter fence of the facility. I climbed a small rocky ridge that overlooked the entire illuminated yard of facility Blue Rock. Down below, the transport trucks were idling, their diesel engines sending thick plumes of exhaust into the cold night air. The security guards were walking their rounds, completely oblivious to the fact that their entire organization had just been disassembled in cyberspace. Exactly 12 minutes later, the night sky was torn open by the heavy, rhythmic thumping of multiple military helicopters approaching from the south. Massive floodlights suddenly dropped from the clouds, illuminating the entire concrete yard in a blinding white glare. Before the facility guards could even reach for their weapons, 3 heavily armed tactical response teams from the federal agencies breached the main perimeter. Gates and armored vehicles, flashbangs echoing off the steel warehouses with deafening cracks. The breakdown was absolute, chaotic, and completely irreversible. From my vantage point on the ridge, I pulled out a secure, single-use satellite phone and dialed a direct number that I knew by heart, the private, unlisted line that sat on General Arthur Vance's nightstand in his secure residence. The phone rang 3 times before a heavy, sleep-deprived voice answered. "Vance here. This better be urgent." I took a deep breath, looking down at his multi-million-dollar operation being systematically dismantled by federal agents in the valley below. "The grave you dug for me was too shallow, General," I said, my voice completely calm, devoid of any anger. There was an immediate, dead silence on the other end of the line. I could hear his breathing falter, the sudden, terrifying realization hitting his brain like a physical blow. He recognized my voice instantly. He knew the dead don't call at 2 a.m. unless the ledger is being balanced. "Carter?" he whispered, his voice suddenly sounding old, thin, and completely broken. "Look at your secure command monitor, General," I said softly. "The federal marshals are already rolling through your neighborhood gate. Enjoy the retirement they planned for you." I ended the call before he could speak. Another word, dropped the phone onto the rocks, and crushed it beneath the heavy heel of my combat boot. Down in the yard, the facility commander was being thrown against the side of an armored transport truck, his zip ties being pulled tight by federal agents, while crates of heavy hardware were being systematically marked as government evidence. General Arthur Vance didn't make it to his morning briefings at the Pentagon. He was arrested in his pajamas at his private estate, handed a federal indictment for corporate treason, arms smuggling, and the premeditated attempted murder of United States military personnel. The massive shadow logistics network he spent nearly a decade building vanished from the global supply chain in less than 48 hours. His assets were permanently seized. His high rank was stripped from his name with absolute dishonor, and the corporate investors who funded his private militia spent the rest of the week scrambling to delete their own names from the digital paper trail we left behind. I am sitting in a different location now, far away from the railway lines. The air is warm, the morning sun is rising over the eastern horizon, and Duke is sitting right next to my chair, his head resting heavily on my knee as I drink a hot cup of black coffee. My name is still missing from the active duty rosters, and the bronze plaque in the cemetery is still there. I'm perfectly fine with that. Being a ghost has its advantages. Here is what 14 years of service and 48 hours of absolute operational revenge taught me. The men who sit in high offices with stars on their shoulders always believe that power is something given by a title, a rank, or a government stamp. They truly believe they can manipulate the lives of the soldiers under their command like numbers on a spreadsheet, burying their mistakes in unmarked boxes and calling it collateral damage. But true power doesn't come from a silver star pinned to a collar. True power belongs to the soldier who knows how the system is built, who knows where the wires are buried, and who isn't afraid to step back into the light to balance the books. They tried to give me a flawless military funeral. They tried to bury the truth in an empty casket. But they forgot the most dangerous thing about the military machine they built. You can never truly bury a soldier until the mission is completely finished. And General Vance just learned that my mission didn't end in that black site prison. It ended the exact moment his empire turned to ash.